Picture this: a packed dojo in West Los Angeles, 1973. The air thick with sweat and ambition. Two legends stand face to face, but only one of them knows he's about to learn the hardest lesson of his life. Bruce Lee, at the absolute peak of his fame, steps on a mat with fire in his eyes and something to prove. Across from him, Chucknorris, quiet as stone, already a champion but unknown to the world that would one day worship him. What happens next isn't just a sparring match. It's a collision between ego and humility, between the need to dominate and the confidence to simply be. Bruce comes in hot, fast, cocky, ready to show everyone in that room who the real dragon is. Chuck, he just stands there, centered, breathing, waiting. And when it's over, when the silence finally settles like dust after an earthquake, nobody speaks. Because some lessons don't need words. Some victories don't need celebration. And some men don't need to prove a damn thing. The gym smells like old leather and liniment. Late afternoon sun cuts through the windows in amber beams, illuminating particles of chalk dust floating lazy through the air like tiny ghosts. There are maybe 20 people scattered around the space, some stretching, some working bags, most just going through the motions of their Saturday training routine. It's a good dojo, respected, the kind of place where serious martial artists come to refine their craft away from the cameras and the spectacle. The walls are lined with photographs, tournament plaques, faded posters from competitions nobody remembers anymore. In the corner, a heavy bag sways slightly from someone's last combination, the chain creaking with each movement like an old door hinge that needs oil. Bob Wall is running the session today, walking between students, correcting form, offering quiet encouragement. He's a good instructor, patient but firm, the kind of teacher who actually cares whether you learn or just go through the motions. He's in the middle of explaining a hip rotation to a struggling student when the front door opens and Bruce Lee walks in. Not walks, enters, commands. The energy in the room shifts immediately, like someone just turned up the voltage. Conversations stop mid-sentence. The heavy bag stops swaying. Even the dust seems to freeze in those sunbeams. Bruce is wearing his signature black training gear, fitted perfectly to show every muscle, every line of definition. His hair is styled even for practice, swept back with that characteristic confidence. He's coming off a successive fist of fury, his star burning white-hot, his face on magazine from Hong Kong to Hollywood. He moves through the space like a man who knows every eye is on him, and he's perfectly comfortable with it. More than comfortable. He feeds on it. There's a restless energy to him today, something coiled and ready to spring. He's not here to train quietly in the corner. He's here to be seen. Bob greets him warmly, surprised but pleased. They shake hands, exchange brief pleasantries, but Bruce's attention is already scanning the room, cataloging the skill level, the talent, looking for something, or someone. His gaze lands on a figure in the far corner, working methodically through a kata, movement precise and powerful, but without flash, without performance. Chucknorris. He's been training here for a few weeks, preparing for an upcoming tournament, keeping to himself mostly. He's already a world karate champion, but outside the tournament circuit, he's just another serious practitioner. No movie deals. No fame. Not yet. Bruce's eyes light up with something that might be recognition, might be challenge. He knows Chuck's reputation. They've met before briefly at a tournament where Chuck took first place with a display of technique that was technically perfect but, in Bruce's opinion, lacking fire, lacking art. Bruce has strong opinions about traditional karate, sees it as too rigid, too bound by forms and ceremonies. He's been developing his own philosophy, what he's starting to call Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist, and part of that philosophy involves challenging the establishment, proving that his method is superior. He walks across the mat toward Chuck, and the room's attention follows him like a spotlight. Chuck finishes his movement, settles back into a neutral stance, and only then acknowledges Bruce with a slight nod. There's respect in it, but no awe, no nervousness, just acknowledgement, the way you might greet another professional in your field. Bruce stops a few feet away, hands on hips, head tilted slightly in that way he has when he's about to make a point. Chucknorris, Bruce says, loud enough for the room to hear. His accent is slight but noticeable, his English precise and sharp. I've been wanting to see your technique up close. They say you're the best point fighter in the country. Multiple championships, right? Chuck nods again, still not matching Bruce's energy level. I've been fortunate. Fortunate. Bruce repeats the word like he's tasting it, finding it bland. Is that what you call it? I call it skill, dedication, unless you think the trophies just fell into your hands. He's smiling, but there's an edge to it, a sharpness that cuts through the friendly surface. Hard work, Chuck says simply. Same as anyone. Same as anyone. Bruce circles slightly, and now it's clear to everyone in the room that this isn't just conversation. This is a challenge being constructed brick by brick, word by word. You know what I think? I think traditional martial arts, the kind you practice, they make you predictable. All those forms, all those rules, they put you in a box. Real fighting, real combat, it's about freedom, about adaptation, about breaking the forms, not following them. A few people in the room shift uncomfortably. This is getting intense, and they're not sure where it's going. Bob Wall starts to move toward them, maybe to defuse the situation, but something in Bruce's posture tells him to stay back. This is happening whether anyone likes it or not. Chuck absorbs the criticism without reaction. His face remains calm, neutral, like still water. Different approaches work for different people, he says. I respect what you do, Bruce. Your speed is incredible. Your philosophy has value. But what I do works for me. Does it? Bruce is closer now, inside what most people would consider personal space. How do you know it works if you've never tested it against someone who doesn't follow your rules? Tournament fighting, point sparring, it's not real. It's a game. I'm talking about actual combat. No rules, no points, just effectiveness. The temperature in the room has dropped about 10 degrees. Everyone can feel it. This isn't theoretical anymore. This is Bruce Lee, movie star, martial arts icon, challenging a world champion in his own training space. Chuck's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. It's the first crack in his calm exterior, the first sign that Bruce's words are landing. What are you suggesting? Chuck asks, his voice still level but with a note of steel underneath. I'm suggesting we find out. Bruce steps back, gestures to the open mat space. Right here, right now. Not a tournament match. Not for points. Just sparring, but real sparring. Full contact. See whose philosophy actually works when there's no referee to stop things. He looks around the room, making sure everyone's attention is locked in. Unless you're worried your championship trophies won't translate to an actual fight, the silence that follows is crushing. Bob Wall looks like he wants to intervene, but doesn't know how. The other students have stopped even pretending to train. This is about to become one of those moments, the kind people will talk about for years, either as legendary or disastrous. Chuck stands perfectly still, and for a long moment, it seems like he might decline, might walk away from the provocation. That would be the smart thing, the mature thing. But there's something in Bruce's tone, something in the way he's publicly questioned Chuck's abilities in front of all these people, that makes walking away impossible. All right, Chuck says quietly, if that's what you want. Bruce's smile widens. He's got what he came for. That's what I want. Let's show these people what real martial arts looks like. They move to the center of the mat. Bob Wall reluctantly agrees to monitor, though there's not much he can do if things get out of hand. The students form a rough circle around perimeter. Some excited, some worried, all utterly focused. This is Bruce Lee. This is history happening right in front of them. Chuck removes his GI top, revealing a powerful, compact physique, different from Bruce's whipcord definition, but formidable in its own right. He settles into a stance, weight distributed evenly, hands up but relaxed, breathing steady. Bruce bounces on the balls of his feet, hands moving in small circles, head bobbing slightly. He's sizing Chuck up, looking for openings, patterns, tells. His whole body hums with kinetic energy, like an engine revving. And then he moves. The first exchange happens so fast that half the people watching don't even see it clearly. Bruce closes the distance with a blinding burst of speed, throwing a combination of punches that would overwhelm most opponents through sheer velocity alone. But Chuck isn't most opponents. He covers up, absorbs what he has to on his arms, slips what he can, and when Bruce's combination ends, Chuck counters with a single straight punch that stops an inch from Bruce's face. Control. Precision. A point scored in the language of tournament karate. Bruce resets, and there's a flicker of irritation in his eyes. That wasn't what was supposed to happen. He came in with his best speed, his most overwhelming attack, and Chuck handled it like it was routine. Bruce attacks again, this time with kicks mixed in low and high, trying to overwhelm Chuck's defense through variety. But Chuck's footwork is impeccable. He maintains distance perfectly, defending efficiently, waiting for openings rather than creating them through force. They separate again, and Bruce is breathing harder now, not from exhaustion, but from effort, from the realization that this isn't going to be the demonstration he planned. The people watching can feel it too. This was supposed to be Bruce Lee showing everyone how his method was superior. Instead, it's turning into a technical chess match, and Chuck is proven to be a far more difficult opponent than Bruce anticipated. "Come on," Bruce says, voice tight. "Stop defending and fight." "I am fighting," Chuck responds, still calm. "My way." That does it. Bruce's pride, his ego, the part of him that needs to be recognized as the best, it all surges forward. He attacks with everything, speed and power combined, targeting high and low, trying to break through Chuck's defense through sheer overwhelming force. And for a few seconds, it works. He lands a body shot that makes Chuck grunt, catches him with a glancing blow to the shoulder. Bruce presses the advantage, sensing victory, wanting to finish this decisively. But Chuck doesn't break. He weathers a storm, takes what it has to take, and when Bruce overextends on a spinning kick, showing off his flexibility and speed, Chuck sees the opening. Just for a moment, just a fraction of a second, Bruce is exposed. Chuck doesn't think, doesn't calculate, doesn't showboat. He just reacts with years of trained instinct. A single side kick, perfectly placed, perfectly timed, catches Bruce in the ribs with enough force to lift him slightly off the ground and send him stumbling backward. Bruce catches himself, but his hand goes to his ribs, and his face shows something the room has never seen before. Shock, pain, vulnerability. The confident smile is gone. The bouncing energy is gone. He's breathing hard, favoring his left side, and when he looks at Chuck, there's something in his eyes that might be respect, might be anger, might be the beginning of understanding. But Chuck doesn't gloat, doesn't celebrate, doesn't even change his expression. He just stands there, hands still up, ready but not aggressive, waiting to see if this continues or if it's over. The silence in the dojo is absolute. Nobody moves. Nobody breathes. This is the moment where everything could still go terribly wrong, where injured pride could turn this from a sparring match into something dangerous. Bruce straightens slowly, his hand still on his ribs. You can see the calculation happening behind his eyes, the war between ego and wisdom, between the need to save face and the recognition that he just learned something important. He takes a breath, winces slightly, and then something shifts in his posture. The aggression drains away, replaced by something quieter, something more genuine. "That was a good kick," he says finally, and his voice has lost that edge, that need to dominate the space. "Really good." Chuck nods, lowering his hands. "Finally. You're fast. Faster than anyone I've sparred with. But not effective enough against someone who knows how to wait." Bruce says it like he's recognizing something for the first time. "You didn't try to match my speed. You just waited for me to make a mistake." "Different approaches," Chuck says again, but this time it doesn't sound like a deflection. It sounds like wisdom. Bruce walks to the edge of the mat, picks up a towel, presses it against his ribs. He's going to have a hell of a bruise there. The people watching start to move again, conversations resuming in hushed tones, the spell of the moment breaking slowly. But everyone knows they just witnessed something significant. Not just a sparring match between two talented martial artists, but something deeper. A lesson about showboating versus substance, about flash versus foundation, about the difference between wanting to prove you're the best and actually being effective when it matters. Bob Wall approaches carefully, checking if either fighter needs attention. Chuck waves him off, already moving back toward his corner, ready to resume his training like nothing happened. Bruce watches him go, and there's a thoughtfulness to his expression now, a humility that wasn't there when he walked in. He stays on the edge of the mat for a long time, thinking, processing, letting the lesson sink in deeper than just a pain in his ribs. Over the next few weeks, something changes in Bruce. The people close to him notice it first. He talks less about his method being superior to everyone else's. He starts asking more questions instead of making more proclamations. He seeks out Chuck, not for a rematch, but for conversation, for exchange of ideas. They become friends, real friends, the kind that form when two people push each other to their limits and come out the other side with mutual respect. When Bruce plans his next movie, when he needs a villain who can actually challenge him on screen, who can make the final fight believable and spectacular, there's only one person he wants: Chucknorris. The footage of that fight in the Coliseum, the climactic battle in the Way of the Dragon, it becomes iconic. Bruce in his yellow tracksuit, Chuck in black. Two philosophies of martial arts colliding in an abandoned Roman arena. The choreography is brilliant. The techniques are real, and the mutual respect between the fighters comes through in every frame. When Chuck's character finally falls, defeated, Bruce's character doesn't celebrate. He covers the body respectfully with Chuck's black belt, honoring the warrior even in death. People who watch that scene don't realize they're seeing the echo of a real lesson, a real moment of growth that happened in a sweaty Los Angeles dojo months before. But Bruce never forgets that day. In interviews, when people ask him about the best martial artists he's encountered, Chuck's name comes up consistently, not with bitterness, not with excuses, with genuine respect. He talks about how Chuck taught him that different approaches have different values, that there's no one ultimate style, that effectiveness comes from understanding your own strengths rather than trying to prove everyone else wrong. Tragically, Bruce Lee dies less than a year after that movie is released. He's only 32 years old, gone way too soon, leaving behind a legacy that will influence martial arts and cinema for generations. Chuck attended the funeral, one of the pallbearers carrying his friend's casket. He thinks about that day in the dojo, about how close it came to damaging their relationship before it even really began, about how grateful he is that Bruce had the wisdom to learn from the experience instead of letting ego destroy it. Years later, after Chuck becomes a movie star in his own right, after he's achieved his own fame and legacy, reporters sometimes ask him about Bruce Lee, about their relationship, about that famous fight scene in Rome. Chuck always speaks about Bruce with warmth and respect. He talks about Bruce's incredible talent, his revolutionary approach to martial arts, his charisma and vision, but he never mentions the dojo, never talks about that Saturday afternoon when a cocky movie star learned a hard lesson from a humble champion. Because Chuck understands something fundamental that took Bruce a bruised rib to figure out. The strongest people don't need to tell you they're strong. The most skilled don't need to constantly prove their skill. Real power, real mastery, it's quiet and confident, waiting patiently for the moment it's actually needed. It doesn't seek confrontation, doesn't need validation, doesn't require an audience to confirm its worth. The people who train their whole lives, who dedicate themselves to their craft not for fame or recognition, but because the craft itself is worthy, they carry a different kind of strength. It's not loud. It's not flashy. You won't see it in the way they walk or talk or present themselves to the world. But when the moment comes, when someone pushes too hard, when ego meets expertise, that quiet strength speaks with a clarity that no amount of showboating can match. Bruce Lee learned that lesson at 29 years old, at the height of his fame and power, from a man who had been perfectly happy to be forgotten by history if it meant maintaining his integrity and his craft. And in learning it, Bruce became not just a better martial artist, but a better human being. He took that humility, that recognition of his own limitations, and wove it into his philosophy. Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist, became less about proving superiority and more about honest self-expression, about using what works and discarding what doesn't, regardless of style or tradition. The students who were there that day, they scattered over the years, went on their own lives and their own training. But every one of them remembers. They remember the tension, the sound of that side kick landing, the look on Bruce Lee's face when he realized he'd been outpositioned by someone he'd underestimated. Some of them tell the story carefully in their own dojos as a teaching moment. Others keep it to themselves, a private memory of the day they saw two legends collide and watch humility emerge victorious. Bob Wall, who ran the session that day, he went on to appear in several Bruce Lee films himself, became a successful martial arts businessman and author. But that Saturday afternoon remains one of his most vivid memories. The day he watched Bruce Lee's ego take a hit and saw how a real martial artist responds to that kind of humbling. He wrote about it once years later in a magazine article that didn't use names but described the incident. The martial arts community knew exactly who he was talking about. The story became legend, embellished and distorted through countless retellings, but at its core, the truth remained. There's footage that exists somewhere in some collector's vault or studio archive of Bruce and Chuck filming that scene in Rome. Between takes, you can see them laughing, working out techniques, genuinely enjoying each other's company. Bruce demonstrates something rapid-fire fast. Chuck nods, tries it, adds his own variation. They're not competing anymore. They're collaborating. Two masters of their crafts, each bringing something unique, creating something greater than either could achieve alone. That's what growth looks like. That's what happens when ego steps aside and lets excellence emerge. The martial arts world today, it's different from what it was in 1973. Mixed martial arts has proven Bruce right in many ways, shown that cross-training and adaptation are crucial to effective fighting. But it's also proven Chuck right, demonstrated that fundamental technique, discipline, and patience are irreplaceable foundations. The best fighters today, they study Bruce Lee's philosophy and Chucknorris' technique. They understand that it's not either or, it's both and, in dojos and gyms around the world. Instructors use that story, the real one and the cinematic one, to teach their students about respect, about humility, about the danger of letting ego drive your training. They talk about how the flashiest technique isn't always the most effective, how the person who talks the most about their skills is often the one who has the most to prove, how true confidence doesn't need announcement or validation. There are countless martial artists who are technically brilliant, who could break boards and bricks, who could dominate tournaments and competitions, but who you'll never hear about because they don't need you to hear about them. They train for themselves, for the art, for the satisfaction of continuous improvement. They're not trying to be famous. They're not trying to prove anything to anyone. They're just trying to be better today than they were yesterday. Those are the ones, the quiet ones, the humble ones, who carry the real legacy of martial arts forward. Chuck Norris became a cultural phenomenon eventually, an action hero, a meme, a symbol of unbeatable toughness. But if you talk to people who actually knew him, who trained with him, who work with him on films, they'll tell you the real Chuck is nothing like the internet jokes. He's soft-spoken, humble, more likely to ask about your family than to talk about himself. That side kick that staggered Bruce Lee, he probably wouldn't even remember it if you asked, because for him, it wasn't a defining moment. It was just another day of training, another opportunity to practice his craft. That's the ultimate lesson, the one that transcends martial arts and applies to every aspect of life. The people who have truly mastered something, who have put in the decades of hard work and dedication required to reach the highest levels of their field, they don't need to announce it. Their work speaks for itself. Their presence carries its own weight. They can afford to be humble because their competence is undeniable, evident in everything they do without requiring explanation or justification. Bruce Lee arrived at that dojo wanting to prove something, needing to demonstrate his superiority, looking for validation that he was indeed the greatest martial artist of his generation. Chuck Norris arrived just wanting to train, to work on his techniques, to prepare for his next challenge without drama or spectacle. One of them learned something that day. One of them taught something without even trying to teach. And in that exchange, in that moment when ego met expertise and expertise won without gloating, both of them became better versions of themselves. The bruise on Bruce's ribs faded within a couple of weeks. The lesson he learned lasted the rest of his too short life. He carried it with him through his films, through his philosophy, through his teaching. He became more open to other styles, more willing to acknowledge that his way wasn't the only way, that effectiveness could take many forms. And when he died, when the martial arts world mourned the loss of one of its brightest stars, Chuck Norris carried his friend's casket, knowing that their friendship, born from conflict and forged through mutual respect, represented the best of what martial arts can teach us. So here's what matters at the end of this story. Not that Chuck Norris beat Bruce Lee in a sparring match, because it wasn't really about winning or losing. Not that Bruce's approach was wrong or Chuck's was right, because they were both brilliant in different ways. What matters is what happened after that sidekick landed, after the moment of truth when pride and humility stood face to face. Bruce could have let his ego turn that moment into permanent resentment. He could have made excuses, blamed the rules of engagement, insisted on a rematch until he got the outcome he wanted. But he didn't. He absorbed the lesson. He grew from it. He let it make him better. And Chuck? Chuck never claimed victory, never bragged about the day he put Bruce Lee on his heels. He just went back to training, continued his journey, stayed focused on his own path rather than defining himself by someone else's validation or defeat. That's the mark of true strength. Not the ability to win, but the wisdom to know that winning isn't always the point. In a world that constantly screams for attention, that rewards the loudest voice and the flashiest performance, there's profound power in being the person who doesn't need the spotlight, the one who does the work without seeking credit, the one who has nothing to prove because their competence speaks volumes in the silence. That's the legacy of the story, the real lesson that echoes through the decades since that Saturday afternoon in West Los Angeles. True strength doesn't announce itself. Real mastery doesn't acquire an audience. And the most dangerous person in any room is usually the one standing quietly in the corner, centered and calm, with nothing to prove and everything to offer if the moment calls for it.